Is the recording on, James? Great. Welcome, everybody, to the May 29th monthly meeting of the Mobility and Parking Board. We'll start with a roll call. I see we've got Rolf online.
Yes, I'm here.
We can hear you. That's good. Thank you. Carl?
Present.
Susan?
Present.
And Corey Satella is present. And I see we don't have Luke or Bill. And we're not expecting Joy because she let us know she's not coming. And I believe we've got quorum, so we can proceed. Okay. So the first item is the approval of the agenda. Any comments on the agenda before we vote for approval? Anybody object to the agenda? That's a no. So the agenda is approved. And next up is the approval of the April minutes. I know there was a small change suggested. Did that change make it through? Did I get Carl had suggested that I think it was just one small change, wasn't it? I'm sorry, did I miss some other changes?
So are you asking about April minutes?
April minutes.
So I sent something via email, which I've probably forgotten. I actually had some time and I went through and I found a couple more things that,
Okay,
and I wasn't here for April, so I won't vote on it, but, the two things that I just caught was one, I believe there was multiple folks that gave public comment. It only mentioned Joan, but didn't Ellie, who lives up, I think it's Ellie up on Washington, gave public comment as well, and that was not captured in the minutes.
that's right. You do or don't? I do recall there was, yeah, up
Some of the neighbors up from up there were
Sunshine Lane or something.
Washington.
Is it the one where we're all remotely?
No, we were here, but yeah, there was a,
I do recall that. I can make that change. I want to say it noted it, but it didn't specifically mention the speaker, so I can probably.
And the way reading it, and like I said, I wasn't here, it just appeared like it all came from Joan, and I believe there was,
So.
that's the main point.
I can go in.
okay,
The second thing, there was a mention of a September 14th working session with city council to review here, let me pull it up instead of trying to do it by memory. Where's the packet? Apologies. So March. So in the April, hang on, I'll find it here. A presentation on Washington Avenue and something else. I'm pretty sure it was April. Now I can't find it. I can search here in just a second. It just, the only point I was going to make is September 14th. Yeah, here it is. So it's in the project updates and transportation improvements. I believe it's second sentence, a working session with city council and Mountain Metro was planned for September to discuss a new route, and a presentation on a walkable city was scheduled for September 14th. And I guess I was reading those as one and the same, and maybe they're intended to be separate, but September 14th on my calendar is a Saturday, not a Tuesday. And so that was confusing to me.
I didn't catch that, and I'm not looking at them right now. So do we want to approve the minutes subject to those minor adjustments, or would we like to defer approval of the minutes?
amenable to whatever. I mean, I just, as long as it gets corrected, I'm good with it. Just because, people coming in and reading it that want to attend or listen, it should be clear and not mislead them. So
We can look into it.
Okay, so have you got those two items? So there was the public comment and then there was the potentially a presentation in September and we're not sure about the date.
and given there was the comment I sent an email, which I apologize, I forgot about, it might be good to wait and just review it quickly next month
Next one.
before we approve April. I mean, we can go on the other ones.
I'd be okay with that. So we'll look for some revised minutes and then we'll plan to approve April and May at the next meeting. Okay. Rolf, jump in or wave your hands
Yeah,
if you have
that's
it.
fine. Yeah.
Great, thanks. Okay, so item 4 is public comment on non-agenda items. Carl, you're
So-
not public.
Sorry. No, before we move on, apologies. There was additional minutes in the packet. Are those there for approval or I guess maybe I was confused.
No, we had already approved the previous month's minutes, if I'm not mistaken.
So I provided the additional minutes just because there were changes that were asked for. They were minor changes, but I did make them and I provided them in this packet just so it's more or less a confirmation that they were added in as requested, because the board did vote to approve the minutes given those changes.
Okay. So I don't think we have action to take on those unless there was a question or comment about changes made.
I have 2 comments and a question.
Go ahead, yeah.
And I apologize, this is late, so if I missed the boat, that's totally fine and my fault. So I'll start with a question. So in March, the minutes says Carl with a C, which I'm assuming that's me, which is with a K. Will investigate the feasibility of implementing a pilot program for parking free zones and report back to the group. Can anyone clarify that? Because I did not capture that action out of that meeting. And I'm happy to follow up on it, but I've lost track. And maybe I just need to go back and watch the March video and see what I promised us to do that I haven't done yet.
So I'm sorry, Carl, that was listed in the April minutes,
March
in the March?
March
minutes?
27th, it's the
Revised
second
minutes.
section, next steps. And it's the 4th.
Uh-huh. Okay. Next steps. Well, I don't recall that discussion, but it does say it here, doesn't it?
I'll try and go look at the video and see if I can figure out what I was
Okay.
supposed to do and follow up. Again, I guess I got here a little bit early and I had time, and further down in March in the city council project updates and Pike Ride. The second sentence says the purchase of Metro discs and the completion of asbestos, blah, blah, blah. I wasn't sure what Metro discs are.
Probably Metropolitan District.
Oh, the purchase of
Yeah.
that 2 residences to expand the Schmitzny.
Correct.
Okay, well, so
Just needs to be say Metro District.
yeah, noted is confusing. And then the last thing, and I apologize, this is super nitpicky and this is kind of like my OCD, but going through all of the minutes, it looks like with at least April and March, we've kind of landed on a standard format, which, it has, the month and who was present, but the previous months, if you get to those section, it just the font changes and you assume that it's like February or something, right? It's not clear. where one month's minutes ends and the next month starts. And so just for the record, it would be nice to have standalone minutes that are properly labeled if someone prints them off, that it's clear what you're looking at. As well as, yeah.
Because you're looking at the packet where they're one after another.
correct.
I see.
Yes, yeah. So just a minor detail thing.
But I would assume on the official record, they are, in the documents on the website, they're individualized by and titled
Separate
separately.
file. Yeah, well, that
This
could
was
be,
more for our benefit is what I'm guessing, I'm assuming.
but even there, if someone prints it off and mixes it with something else, just knowing what that content relates to would be extremely useful.
Yeah, I think our new format is good and clear. Like it.
Yeah, I like the new format as well.
You.
So sorry to belabor minutes, but I had too much time on my hand beforehand, it seems.
I just want to say thank you very much for taking the time to dig in, Carl, and we welcome, we want to get it right. So thank you for bringing those up. Let's just note for the record that I see there's a couple other places where Carl's name is spelt with a C. So we got Carl with a K here. So we'll try to get that one updated in future minutes. Do you want to take action on previous minutes, or you've just made a couple of corrections?
I mean, I think that they've already been voted on, so it's too late. But I mean, if we can go back and correct them, that's cool. I don't think we need as a board, I mean, I've missed the boat, right? So we don't need to vote on them again.
Yeah, I think officially we're not supposed to correct the minutes after we've approved them. If we wanted to, we could issue a document that says, hey, we noticed there was an error in some approved minutes. And I'm wondering if you want to do that, Carl, or if we should, I mean, I think we've cleared up the confusion here. Do you think we need to go back and make a statement or a document saying, hey, we've found some errors that we wanted to correct?
I'm happy to send a follow-up email, and if however folks want to handle that is fine by me.
I need to check on that, because especially if they're approved already and could maybe noted on there.
Yeah, if there was a like a major change or a major error and the minutes were already approved, I think we could take some steps to document that and address it. I think these are fairly minor changes and we probably don't need to do that unless you feel strongly about it, Carl. Okay. All right. Well, I'll try to keep an eye on the minutes too. And I'm not totally sure when the meeting summaries are coming through. James, can we get those like within a week of when the meeting is? So that would give us some time to read through it and also remember what had happened at the meeting. Is it extra work for you to do it the week after in the week following our meetings?
No, I can accommodate that.
Is that all right, Juan? We don't want to okay. Okay, great. Maybe that can put us on a path for being on top of our minutes a bit more in the future. Okay. So I don't have the agenda now in front of me. It was up there. Next item after approval of minutes is public comment. Do we have anyone else online, James?
Doesn't look like it to me.
Okay, Natalie's online there. And so we should maybe note in the record that Natalie is online. And if you want to promote her to a participant, I think that's appropriate. She's a council liaison, so that would give her the ability to just speak up if she needed to on something. Oh, okay.
I think I can speak anytime.
Oh, yep. Okay, we can hear you. Thank you, Natalie.
Yep.
Okay, well, actually, that's great because you're up next. Next item is City Council Liaison Report.
Sure. So yeah, I mean, again, Juan knows all of this because this is a thing, but we had the tram update. for council. And again, I think like all of us, you guys have been tracking the numbers and we're interested in what's working and what's not working. And I think ultimately we're going to try to expand the stops. So instead of just the parking lots, to include the metro bus stops if possible, and then really just consider whether or not these trams are doing what we need them to do. And so do we keep them? Do we purchase more? Do we look at different options? And so just that idea that we have a vision for what the trams can do in terms of moving folks around. And I don't quite know if the current situation is what does that for us, but we'll know more as we go along. And the other thing, the Chamber of Commerce had a meeting of all of its lodging properties. And one of the main things that they discussed was that they felt it was key to their promotion of their lodging properties that they could connect them to transportation and mobility so that you could park at their location and not get in your car. And that was a really big thing for them. And so I think that was interesting and something that we can certainly work with. I'm trying to think what else. Let's see. That was kind of the big stuff. I know you had asked some questions about, Para put an RFP out for Higginbotham Flats and just that idea of what's the best way for MAPS to participate in that process. And again, like I said, with our advisory boards, we're always trying to figure things out. But, I do know that since it's a designated park, right? Para will be the lead on that, but how MAPS can support their process, I'm not quite sure, but I think there's opportunity there. So I think that's my spiel.
Charles, do you have a question?
So Natalie, a comment or a question on that. I mean, hopefully Harib creating a new public park is going to consider, or will ask MAP to consider, how to get kids in the nearby neighborhoods, to be able to access that park without having to be driven by, mom and dad up to the top of Higginbotham Flats, right? I think, there's that trail or road or whatever it is, connection that the city owns. And so to me, I think that's a really great opportunity to connect that park to the neighborhood.
Mhm.
And, that would be such a great, new asset for that neighborhood. And so really trying to embrace the new park and make it, accessible for everyone.
Mhm. So yeah, a couple things there. I think, is it tonight, the Creek Walk? Are they doing the Creek Walk meeting?
Tomorrow.
Out at Serpentine. Okay, so obviously that'll be a big one. And then I think you're right. And I do think that, like anything, right? You get a seat at the table if you show up and voice your opinion. So I hope we all track Parib's progress and are there. But I don't know that we should expect them to come to us, but I think we can certainly reach out to them and say we're interested and how can we help.
So what would be the process for that? Like, can we, as a board, can we say, hey, Para, we noticed you're doing this and we're interested, we'd like to be engaged. Is that something that staff can communicate, or what's the right way for us to let them know that we'd like any updates when it's available?
Interesting. I mean, I guess I don't know exactly the best way. I know how I would do it. I would show up to one of their meetings and speak during public comment and say, what's the best way for us to work together, and kind of make that request, or email Danu and ask the best way to work with them. But I'm trying to think, in terms of staff asking, again, you're not trying to take over their process. You're just trying to support their process. So, technically I'm liaison to both. I'm liaison to Parib as well. So in theory, it should be easy for me to connect the dots. And so I'll do my best.
Carl, go ahead.
So sorry, a couple follow-up questions, and I'll show my ignorance. So with a new park, what dictates like the parking requirements? I'm assuming there's some sort of code for that, but can we influence hey, you should have a bike ride station there, or encourage people to, visit without having to park their car? Or are they gonna, is it gonna be a new park with 5 parking spaces or a new park with 500 parking spaces?
And so let me just clarify the process as I understand it. Parab has created a request for proposals for a design or for concept design of that park. So they put that out to bid. They're looking for a contractor that will come in and engage with the city to develop plans for the park. My assumption is that it will include some public process as part of that. And the question I had asked was it possible for us to be involved like really far upstream, even to help shape that RFP? And what we've learned is because, it's a parks property and Parab is managing that process. We as a member of the public, or like if we want to reach out, we could visit their board and we can let them know that we're interested, but we won't be involved in creating the RFP. And I think that's already gone out.
The RFP's already gone out, yeah. Mhm.
It has gone out. Okay. So our chance to ask those questions, I think, is coming up, Carl, and I think it's one that we want to keep an eye on. And I'm going to take a little note that I will reach out to Parab. I'll either go to a meeting or I'll reach out to them and let them know. And I will do that if I could borrow your pen for a second. Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, so their next meeting is July 1st at 6 p.m. And again, I mean, I can definitely convey that you're interested in participating, but again, I think anything, an email outreach, I mean, you're just trying to make it a better park for the community. And, everything you've said seems reasonable. I mean, none of that, so I think it's great.
Okay. I know I won't be in town for that July 1st, so I will, I'll send an email, and if you wouldn't mind, Natalie, just remind them when you meet and let them know that we are interested and want to support that process and help make that space great.
Great.
Was there any other comment on the council liaison report? I'll just make the comment that I attended the tram update and thought Juan did a great job informing council about what was going on with the tram. I was really impressed with the depth of knowledge that council had and the amount that they'd thought about the tram. What I took away from that discussion was, I think it's kind of what Natalie said. We all had this vision of these electric trams, and we had a community meeting to talk about what it might do for us. And we had probably 1,000 ideas, and we definitely could not accomplish those with just 2 trams. Some of the things we've learned is there's a lot of variability in the battery life and some reliability concerns. So we need to start small with the tram. And it's possible that as we look at supplementing that tram system, there was some discussion about whether or not electric really is the right way to go because of the limitations and the duty cycle. So, we really, the trams that we have today, they certainly can't run 24/7, and there's some challenges with keeping them charged. And it may be that we look more broadly at supplementing Mountain Metro with other means in the future. And I was pleased to hear the discussion about having the trams go to the existing bus stops. Really makes a lot of sense to me. The comments were, these trams, they come in, they pull into the parking lot, but it's not really clear that people should be getting on or off them. And it's a bit confusing. So having them integrated with the existing Mountain Metro system made a lot of sense to me. So I was glad to hear that that's the direction that we can go. Okay, so moving on, now we have presentations. Do we have any presentations scheduled? Okay, making good time here. New business staff reports. Juan, you're up.
Yeah. We won't have I left the Pike ride statistics from March. We will not have we'll have the quarterly one next month. So I'll update this slide right here. And this was the one that was presented in our last meeting. You can go to the next slide, James. This still reflects the previous sheet. And we can move forward and start with the Click Fix and the Mountain Rider, Metro ridership.
One quick question.
Go ahead.
So going back to the last chart, the trips by week, I was curious, there was that spike the week of February 25th.
Mhm.
Was there some special event in Manitou that?
I believe
week
that
drove
one,
that?
it was a weekend and it could have been a special event.
I mean, it's not, because Mardi Gras is in,
Well, it
Mardi
would-
Gras was
it would have been
postponed.
Carnival, but that was postponed this year to the next week because of the weather.
Yep.
Normally, that's what it would have been.
is that, but that's a week. So is that picking up the following weekend? I mean, I just, hey, that's an interesting jump and just curious if we had some explanation. Yeah, because well, I don't know if that's week end or week beginning of the 25th. Because it could be the 25th through March 2nd. Anyways, just thought that was curious that it felt like people visiting some sort of event were making use of Pike Ride, which is a good thing. And hey, how do we promote more of that?
Yeah, Carnival was actually on March 2nd.
I'll
this
bet
year.
that's beginning of that week 225 and Carnival dumped into that week.
Could have been.
Makes
Yeah.
sense.
I'm
I
guessing.
could look it up.
So
Just-
I don't know what kind of marketing they did for Carnival and Pike Ride, but hey, it worked at some basic
It
level.
worked.
Let's do more.
We just got to get more days to get to that peak.
I think
And the
both
Pike Ride expansion will help.
both Pike Ride and the Chamber did some marketing to encourage people to use Pike Ride. So yeah, that's working.
And the weather had improved dramatically by the time we actually did Carnival, because the week before, I don't think anybody would have ridden their bikes.
Right.
That's, no.
Okay, so see Click Fix. Oh, sorry, this is Mount Metro. We can do Mount Metro now. This is January.
So I thought it was interesting that in the off season that the number 3. Yeah, we had multiple months. It was curious that in like January, the number 3 had higher ridership than the 33, which, not as many people using the incline, obviously people not using the cog. But then now as we kind of get into, I can't remember how far month wise we went, April. Yeah, April, you're starting to see the Route 33 really pick up, which it'd be really interesting to, and I don't know that we can get this, but is that cog users or incline or, obviously it's both, but what's the breakdown? Would be really curious.
I'm not sure we have a way to collect that data.
Yeah, you'd have to do some independent survey or something.
Even 36 is going to be interesting now that they have the cutaways. We'll see how that plays out, for these coming months.
By the way, I know when that initially rolled out, those cutaways were not well marked.
Right.
And now the new ones, they clearly says that it's a 36, and I saw people using it this last weekend
Right.
when I was out walking. So I mean, that's great that we finally tied that
Yeah,
together.
we did meet with them and we did let them know about labeling the numbers so it's visible to everyone. So they did a pretty good job with that. Any questions on anything else?
I'm grateful to have the data. I'm still getting my head around the ridership data. So
Okay.
thanks for continuing to supply it.
And I'll throw one more question out there. So the 36, that officially started May 1st?
It was in May.
It looks like there's data there for the 28th. So maybe they started a couple days early.
Yeah, that's why it's grayed out. So it's really the 26th, if I'm reading it correctly. That's when it started.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see with like the earlier comment from Natalie on the lodging, folks wanting to have mobility options if they promote this. and make use of it, we should expect to see those numbers go up.
We're good, James. We can go to the C-click fixes. Go ahead and give them the overview, James.
So pretty much we closed out every request that we had for this month. Including work orders, any work orders that were created during the month of April, those were resolved. And I did not see any carryover for the month of April. I typically try to have the exact amount of requests that we had for the month, but I did not get that number. But this is the full report. It does have every request that we received as well as the actions that were taken. Whether it be work orders being created or we just resolved it.
So thanks again for sharing these for our awareness. And the comment I'll make is, when I envisioned that we would get this data, I think I was thinking that we might get some visibility to issues related to bike and ped access, mobility access, but those don't come through the parking department. Those would be sent to Public Works. And so I may do a little bit of digging around. I know that information is available and I can go look it up in different ways. So
We do get mobility stuff. It's just we don't get them very frequently. Majority of what we see is parking related. If it's a maintenance request, that is true. Sometimes it does go to streets.
so we had the debris in the
or
bike lane,
parks.
debris in the bike lane, signs in the bike lane. I think those were all handled by Public Works and not by the parking department.
Yeah,
Yeah,
those are-
I did see those. They were by streets and parks combined.
And parks.
And parks.
And just to clarify, anything bus related would probably go to Public Works as well, bus stop, that kind of stuff. Is that a?
For the bus stops, we usually contact Mountain Metro for an issue. It'll come to us, but then we'll contact Mountain Metro and they'll address it.
So
And
we could expect to
we
see
would
that.
see it on here.
You would still see it on here. Right.
Okay. Great. Well, we'll keep an eye on that and thanks for your work to address those and close them out. Carl.
So I had one more comment, if I may. So from James, from your update, to me, the most interesting piece and critical piece was your statement that all of this SCF work orders got closed and there's nothing outstanding. I don't know if that's something that we can include in the packet, right? Because you look at the few C-click fix things here, they say, oh, most of them say, I mean, some of them say that, oh, the car was towed or it got dealt with, but several of them, or at least one of them says, got moved to an SCF work order and you're kind of left hanging as the public on the outside.
Yeah, and Carl, it does give us a timeline. As soon as it closes out the request, it takes us to the next step, which is who we designated to the proper person that's going to handle that issue. And then at that point, once it's completed, we do close it out.
Well, I guess as a user of C-click fix, it's a little bit, general public user of C-click fix, it's disconcerting in some cases. And I get like not every task is a 5-minute thing that you can just submit somebody, go fix this. Some things are like, it's going to take a year or whatever, right? So you need to have a work order. But you kind of, as the public loses visibility to that once it goes to the SCF system.
Okay.
And so that's why, James's comment that, hey, all of them got closed and there's nothing outstanding is a major and significant accomplishment that I think we should take credit for.
Okay, yeah. It only gives us, like, we're not able to extend it for that amount of time, like 6 months. It's usually within days, unless it's something special and a huge project, then it will get extended. But we will note it on there, like before we close it out. This project will last, 3 to 6 months, for example. But we cannot, it just gives us certain amount of days. I believe it's how many days, James? Like 6 to 8 days?
I think it's 10.
Okay.
I have to double check, but I'm not 100%, but I know with requests, if we can't resolve it within a period of time, we basically push it to work order. Most things we can address basically same day, like in the same hour. Especially if it's something simple like this car needs a ticket type thing. Traditionally, we'll wait a few days before we actually close it in case it's continuing. So we'll monitor the situation over a couple of days, and if either the vehicle leaves and doesn't come back or whatever it might be, we'll close it out. But yeah, traditionally it's stuff we can address same day. But if it's like this sign needs to be replaced or repaired, we usually will move it to a work order. That way it can then be prioritized and resolved.
Well, yeah, and again, just to reemphasize, it's trying to get visibility into the work orders, right? I mean, I get the see quick fix and there's a certain timing for all those tickets, but it's, getting some sort of visibility into the work orders and, again, just to toot your horn, hey, you closed all the SCF work orders and there's nothing outstanding in the SCF system, I think is a major accomplishment.
I think I may have a solution, because when I was getting this report, when you turn it into this format, it gives you all of this extra data. Whereas on the dashboard on the site, it breaks down all your requests, and it even shows ones that had work orders opened and whether or not their status is open or if it's been completed. So I'm going to see if I can't get that view for you. That way it
That would
won't
be
have
awesome
as
to
much
include.
detail, but at the same time, if you're a member of the public and you go in, you can see all the same data that's on here. So I may try to get that more summary view that shows the request, the dates, and then whether or not there was a work order. So the next meeting, I'll try to get both, and then maybe we can decide which one you prefer, or if you want both, it'd be easy. Like this doesn't take me hardly any time at all to populate. So I might try that and see if that more or less kind of provides what you need.
Both sounds fantastic to me, but that's just my input.
Okay.
Thanks for checking into that, James.
Yep.
You can go to the PowerPoint now. Okay, so we can begin now our book study. Well, one of the things with the new bike study, there wasn't a lot that was applicable to parking and trams. It was mostly walking and biking. And some of the ideas that I took away, just looking at, attractions that appeal to people who are walking in bikes. They want to be able to go to places where it's appealing, it's attractive to go there, whether they're walking or using a bike. But some of the things that I noted was like trees, how do they contribute to walkability and biking? Creating a master biking plan to promote walking as well. The inventory cuts, I felt that was very important. Are some of the sidewalks safe or are they unsafe? And then an inventory on the nighttime lighting to ensure that people are feeling safe. Look at, when they're biking, walking, is it well lit? Does it need more lighting? I felt that was very important. And even looking at the art of, for the beautification of the city, I know Denver charges like a vax tax on buildings were abandoned. And if they don't if they don't fix it within a certain time, there's a fee, there's a large fee to it for them to beautify that place or get it up to code of standards. And then if they don't fix it within a time, there'll be heavier fines. And if they don't meet the criteria within that time frame, then they're forced to sell the building. So it's one way to enforce of beautifying, you know, their location or getting it up to standards. And they just like identifying pitfalls and, you know, when we're looking at both walkability and biking, not to have the mindset of, you know, what works for me, but what works for everyone. And those were my takes from the books that I read. So we go around.
Yeah, anybody else want to jump in with their observations? Would you like to start, Susan?
Sure, I'd love to start. Well, I love the sections we were reading this week, really focusing on walkability. As I read them, I realized that's a core base level we need to achieve because everybody walks. Not everybody bikes, but everybody walks, even if it's just from the car to where they're going. So I really appreciated this. I thought there were definitely some things we do well if we start with that. I think the number one thing we do well is the historic district. I think that has added to the interest in our streets. It's why people come here to walk, whether they're from in town or down the road or out of state. Nobody walks in Colorado Springs because it's ugly downtown. Their urban renewal destroyed their interest and their walkability for downtown. So huge advantage for us. I thought we do well. The trees are hard sides, buildings up to the sidewalk, the ratio of our street and buildings to make it comfortable. But I think we have a lot of opportunities for improvements. My first major question is, do we have an accurate inventory of our sidewalks? Do we know where we have sidewalks, where we don't? I can think of so many streets where they just stop. Do we know which ones meet standards and which don't? Not just downtown, because walkable cities, one of my favorites is Charleston. Walking the historic district in Charleston is fabulous. Small sidewalks, but there's sidewalks everywhere. I can't walk the residential streets here and walk all on sidewalks. People are out on the streets. I'm out on the streets. So things to work on, widening our walks and make the sidewalks continuous, especially in the residential area. And I also thought these chapters really pointed out, kind of unfortunately, our challenges we're going to face with the east end of our commercial district, the renewal area, urban renewal area. We've done pretty much everything wrong according to what the book says. The highway department, or CDOT did it, so it looks like a highway. There's no trees bordering it. The parking is in front of the edifices instead of behind them. So it's just not conducive to walking. So that's going to be a long-term fix, unfortunately. But we need to keep that in mind as we're looking to the west side of town, so that the sidewalks, and it's attractive to walk.
Do you mind if I make one
Oh,
comment?
sure.
So I fully agree with your east side assessment, though part of me thinks back to what it was like before they redid it, where it was weeds and dirt and no sidewalks. And so, yes, it doesn't meet Jeff spec standards, but at least now you could walk there. It's not enjoyable, but at least it's possible, which is an improvement. And so just to recognize that, I think is worth mentioning.
That's a good point. I was relieved when we saw the new sidewalks. Much more walkable than it was, but opportunity for improvement long-term down that way. So I think the cautionary tale I'm taking is to keep these principles in mind as we look at trying to redevelop and improve the west end of downtown. I think if we can keep these in mind as we look at our opportunities, which kind of plays into what's going to happen with the addition to the Schmidtschneid lot, that we need to keep these in mind. But anyway, those were my observations. I really enjoyed reading this. I think I'm really into the walkability of town.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Thanks for sharing those. Juan, are you able to comment? Do we have a sidewalk inventory?
No, that's one of the things that it's on the next slide that we need to address so that we can have a good idea how many we have and are they safe, are they not safe? Do they need improvements?
And so that's something we would plan to develop. And so when we do that, would we also do an inventory of the curb cuts?
Everything.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's on one of my slides. We need to do an
Okay.
inventory.
Okay, so we'll get to
Complete
that in
inventory.
a second. And the other thing I will just, you mentioned the trees, and I think overall we do a pretty good job with trees. I know it's a focus for a lot of people. Do we have a canopy plan or a tree plan? Because this talks about, you can have a plan and talk and pick the different kinds of trees and everything like that. And I'm not sure if we do have a document. I know we have a lot of people passionate about trees. Does Manitou have a plan?
I think I can connect with Parks and find out a little bit more on that because that is a good question.
Great,
Because
thanks.
I think that would make a huge difference. So I agree.
Carl?
So a comment on that, no, I don't have the particulars, but I do recall that in the last code rewrite, that there was a provision around tree canopy in the code. And like I said, I don't recall the particulars, but there was some addition there on the topic of trees.
Okay, so we'll get a little bit of research and we may come with a recommendation for a canopy plan. James, did you have something to share?
I do just want to throw it in. I know our arborist was more or less doing like a survey of all the trees that the city manages as far as getting their condition and sizing and the types of tree they are. So that might be part of it. So that might be something to look into, but I do know that was an ongoing effort fairly recently. I want to say earlier this year. He was going around doing that pretty much everywhere we manage trees, basically.
Okay, so yeah, if we're getting into making walkability improvement recommendations, that might be something we want to dig into a little more. Carl, did you have some other things you want to? Sure. Rolf, can you hear us? We're talking about the book study here and wondering if you had some comments on the chapters we were looking at this month.
Yes, I do. Manitou walkability is different than most other towns. It kind of starts right at, well, Hiawatha parking lot, then goes west. And we've done a good job of improving that. It was hard to do, but we did it. But we need to improve it going the other direction. I know we jumped into the urban renewal area and did a great job down there. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better than it was. But the big gap, and until that is fixed, it's not gonna. Our walkability is going to be limited to just walking up, and that's why the expansion of the downtown piece by piece towards the east is necessary, and trying to get businesses to locate in that particular area. It's like a forest just slowly, is spreading out. Building another forest away is okay, but it's that in between, and that's what we're going to have to work on. The book says it's got to be a good, safe walk, obviously, and it has to be an interesting walk, and that's what we should probably be focusing on. It's just east of City Hall there, and piece by piece, to make it more interesting, to encourage businesses, retail, walkable business type development, with the footprint going right to the street and things like that. So if we had if we really tried hard, I think we could do better to expand the walkable area of downtown. And so that's it.
Great. Thanks, Rolf. Carl, you're up.
Awesome. I'm ready this month. So I enjoyed these chapters as well. A couple things really stood out to me, which I wanted to reread just for everybody's benefit. Like in the beginning of part, what is it, 16, make sidewalks right. I love the statement, and it just summarizes it really succinctly. What most impacts walking is located on either side of them. Dangerous roadways, unfriendly, missing buildings, all that sort of stuff, right? So it's the experience, right? That's really important, and proximity and how safe you feel, as well as the visual interest, really drives the walking experience. And the perfect example, like if you walk up Crystal Park Road, right? The first part, the sidewalks, probably what, 2 feet wide, 3 feet wide, cars coming by really close by, it's uncomfortable. You go around the corner, and then you have parking, effectively a parking protected sidewalk. Oh, hey, I can, listen to the birds and enjoy myself. And then all of a sudden the sidewalk ends and you're walking in the gutter, and, again, the experience isn't great. And all that to say, I just want to really emphasize, and I'll be the broken record. I think I say this every month. We need to think outside of downtown. We need to think outside of Manitou Avenue, right? I mean, everybody, whether you live in Crystal Hills or the top of Pawnee or where, top of Washington, is having the ability to not drive your car if it's your choice, I think is important, and we should try and support that. The other statement that I really wanted to highlight, which I think is super awesome, was, I'll quote, "The walkable city is the rollable city. And when a city works well for people in wheelchairs, it works well for everyone." I think that's really powerful, right? If we are, ADA compliant, it's going to be a great walkable experience for everyone, whether you have a disability or not. The specific comments that I wrote down in reading these chapters, and I think I probably got these out of order, so I apologize. But I found the curb cut discussion really interesting. And just pointing out, like at the Subway and Jack's Liquor, there are 3 curb cuts into that parking lot, and that's a pedestrian crossing. I mean, that's a perfect opportunity to close 2 of those, and, it would relieve a lot of people doing crazy U-turns and all that, and make it a better walking experience. And that would be something that we could possibly achieve in a kind of a short-term period. The other example that I wanted to point out, I thought it was interesting during the discussion of the Manitou cabins. When they presented their plan, initially they had a half dozen, maybe even more, curb cuts accessing parking for those cabins. We came and, voiced that, hey, for residents in that neighborhood, we wanted to have a sidewalk, and having all those, that cross traffic is incompatible with the pedestrian experience. And the developer, walked away from it because they were overparked and it wasn't a big deal. But it was just interesting that, citizens had to make public comment for that, and it wasn't driven by city staff or, whoever, right? And so it's just another opportunity, and we're all learning, right? And so, hey, the next time planning gets something like that, I would love for them to take a little bit more initiative to maybe try and address curb cuts. And maybe we just need to have a code around it or something so it's more formal, and that's a longer term thing.
Carl, can I just jump in on that point? I think,
yeah, please.
Maybe that's an opportunity for this board to really be thinking about, like, whenever there are these plans that are coming up, we can be the voice that could bring that forward, not necessarily just to citizens, but, as the map board, we've read this book, we understand that. Maybe that's a role that we can play in future planning initiatives. I
agree with that. I mean, it's interesting, that Manitou cabin, I don't mean to pick on them, but, that's a major development. And, they're talking about bringing, what was it, 9 or 10 new lots plus the 18 cabins and, whatever. So it's 28 new residences, an average of 2+ cars per resident, so it's 100 new vehicles plus multiple trips per day. Hey, there's a transportation and mobility impact with that development. And, that you would think the map board might have an opportunity to have some sort of say on it. So, the next topic was, there was a section on parklets, which I think are super awesome. I believe my understanding, well, so during COVID, I don't know if folks recall, but I think it was the Creative Art District did the hula hoop art project. And the intent was to use those 4 parklets. They never got used. And so just to put in a plug that I know a lot of people put a lot of effort into that, and those are sitting somewhere. And if there's an opportunity to make use of those from a art perspective, that would be awesome, especially for parklets. But the challenge I believe we got was we don't own Manitou Avenue. It's a CDOT managed street. And so our ability to pivot quickly and add parklets is severely constrained. And that's not to say that maybe we could put it on Cannon or some other street, side street. Not that there's tons of side streets downtown. But just, all that to put in a plug for, hey, I think there's been discussion of trying to take back control of Manitou Avenue from CDOT so that we have more flexibility to do what's right for us versus it being dictated from the state, is something to consider. And then 2 more sections. I'm going as fast as I can. The trees, I think I love that section. It's aligned with Manitou's values. I support it. Tree canopy, cooling, improving the experience, all that stuff is awesome. Again, I believe the challenge in Manitou is we can find people to plant trees, but it's the watering and maintenance is where we fall short. And so I think we need to address that before we really pursue that at any level or scale. And then the last section, it talked about front parking, which was mentioned before. And again, to me, that feels like a code or a planning kind of thing. But you think of all the businesses on Manitou Avenue and it feels like almost everyone has front parking. And so it's, that's a nice goal. And I get the concept that Jeff is trying to convey, but to initiate any kind of meaningful change in Manitou is going to take some time. So anyways.
Good comments. And I think on the, that tree comment comes back to what James was saying. So the arborist is doing an inventory. I guess maybe we'd like to be supportive of whatever's needed or make sure it's expressed that we see the benefit of trees for the walkability side of things. And if there winds up being a need for more resources to support taking care of our trees, we'd probably support trying to help find those resources.
And actually one more comment. So I love the picture in the book where they showed, he mentioned trees are also help improve the safety. And he shows the car that had crashed into the tree. Obviously you have to have a pretty big tree to do that, but trees can provide an incredible amount of value for the pedestrian experience.
Great. Okay, well, I'll just add a couple of comments. So I appreciate all the thought that's gone into the book study already. I had the question about the canopy, a canopy plan. And I think, this opened my eyes to the functional need for trees or the value of trees in walkability. So I thought that was really good. I was a bit confused actually about this hard granite curbs comment. This is section 80, where they make a point of saying, granite curbs aren't really that much more expensive than concrete, but doesn't really say what the benefit is or why we would try to do that. And so I just was a little bit confused. I think maybe the good thing if we're going to address sidewalks in Manitou, it's going to take a really a deep dig to learn about them and to learn the pros and cons. And we've got all kinds of standards and lack of sidewalks in places. So maybe granite or not is not the most major thing, but it was a bit confusing for me. Carl.
comment to add on that, sorry, that you triggered. One really interesting, actually fascinating thing, I attended a Dutch cycling presentation. They're a consulting group out of the Netherlands. And in the Netherlands, when they construct infrastructure, they use reusable pieces, like sections of curb. And the reason they do is it allows them to easily reconfigure. And like you, I was confused about the granite curb thing, but just maybe they're portraying that as a reusable item and something that you could lay down and then pick up and move if you needed to adjust based on, user experience.
Okay, the other thing that jumped out at me, the chapter about disallow curb cuts, I hadn't really thought about that very much. I really like your comment about Jack's Liquor. That is kind of a war zone when if you're like walking through there, you never know which way a car is going to come in. And you know what, I'll say sometimes I'm in my car and the light's doing one thing and it's kind of easy to just sort of slip in there and drive kind of diagonally wherever. And so I think you're right that maybe there's an opportunity in that location specifically to make it more walkable. The funny thing is disallowing curb cuts. And then there's also the quote about the walkable and the rollable city. And the term that I've heard used is this curb cut concept, which is it's promoting the idea of curb cuts from the perspective of if you could make things wheelchair accessible and wheelchair friendly by including curb cuts, it helps everybody. So those two things are a little bit in conflict, I think, for me from this.
So again, he wasn't super specific. I was reading his no curb cuts as no curb cuts for driveways or automobiles and not addressing like curb cuts for ADA accessibility at a pedestrian crossing. And maybe I'm reading into it what I want there or something, but.
Yeah, I think that was the intent. And then it also says, there's some places where you really need them, like, parking lots. When they are rarely allowed, curb cuts should be paved to match the sidewalk. Well, I don't know. It was an interesting thought about curb cuts. So maybe that's an opportunity for us. The parklet discussion, agree totally. We've got a restriction from CDOT. That makes it more difficult on Manitou Avenue. But if we wanted to experiment with some of these, there are other places that we could, without making it a big headache to deal with CDOT, that we could investigate that. And I think Canyon Avenue is an obvious next step there, or maybe some other places. So if that's an initiative we wanted to take, there's a lot of good ideas in here. They kind of supported that idea that Natalie had brought up last week was, the idea of moving some restaurant seating into the street and creating a walkway between the people, the people in the street and the restaurant. So a lot of opportunities maybe for parklets and reconfiguring our streets. I'm going to say I'm not going to support Manitou building a skyline like Vancouver's. So that's chapter 85. I couldn't get on board with that, but I see why that works there. And yeah, the discussion about lighting was interesting. Also, that's a major topic of interest for people in this town. So yeah, those are my comments. I thought it was interesting reading. Did you want to follow up at one?
Yeah, no, I was just going to go to the next slide for final thoughts and key takeaways. Yeah, so the final thoughts and key takeaways that I took is what I talked about earlier, like with the older abandoned type of buildings, to really take a look at them, because that is what brings businesses, or people, to look at our businesses in pretty good standing. So looking at maybe repurposing them to bring business into Manitou. And then slightly, I've been looking at even like with our trees, especially since we value them a lot, not having, I know it's kind of hard to put a fine on when they tie a bike up to a tree, but I'm seeing that like more and more, and just looking for ways to enforce that, because when people say that just gives a different image to the city when they see bikes tied up to trees.
Comment on that, if I may. I mean, so if I were to see a bike tied or locked to a tree, to me, that says that there's insufficient bike parking. Safe and convenient and secure bike parking. And, we could probably address it from improving our bike parking versus trying to ticket that person who's
Yeah.
locked to the tree.
Is there an ordinance against locking the tree?
That's what I wrote out there, looking for it to see if we get, if there isn't one, we could create an ordinance for that.
Okay, worthy of more discussion.
Yeah, and then as far as the beautification of the city, adding possibly more trees. I know we have the middle corridor down where they do unloading and unloading, but maybe even looking at areas where they don't designate a whole lot of unloading, and maybe look at that as potential tree areas, for beautification. I know New York did a study that they showed a 10 million investment, and the ROI for them was 230 million social benefit just with biking, walking. And there was an interest, I don't know how they did the calculation for that, but I'd be interested to look at something like that for Manitou Springs, but just figuring out how to calculate that benefit. If we do an investment on biking and walkability, what would that look like? And then also people who are focused on cars, good, whatever's good for bikes does not mean it's bad for cars. But those were my final takeaways.
Are those shown on this slide, or they're, I guess those will appear in the minutes? So
Oh,
you,
yeah.
you didn't write those down and put them in the presentation?
They're on the next slide.
Are they? Okay. Maybe we could look at that slide, James. Oh. So that's not there.
Specifically for,
Oh, well, only I was interested in the final thoughts you had and just want to make sure we get those documented.
oh yeah, I wrote them down, so I can
Okay.
make sure they will be documented in the large document at the end of the session.
Okay, great. Carl.
I was just going to mention to Juan that it's been a couple of years, but Colorado Springs actually, well, it wasn't Colorado Springs, but some organization in Colorado Springs did a economic study of the benefit of cycling in the Pikes Peak region that might be beneficial for your analysis that you mentioned.
Okay.
Yeah, economic impact of biking in the Pikes Peak region. I was involved with that study, so I can get you a copy. It's outdated and it underestimates the impact, but it shows a large impact. I think, just on that note, I think in Manitou, we have broad support for improving mobility and giving people an option to not be trapped in their cars. There certainly will be a strong ROI on that, but I already feel like we're fairly empowered. If we've got some good suggestions for improving mobility, we've already got support, I think, from the leadership of our city. Okay, shall we keep moving?
Yes.
And I noticed I had a draft agenda that had a bit more, including some discussion about this bike master plan, but I think it's not on the published agenda that we voted and approved. So I'm glad this is on here, and it somehow didn't make it onto the agenda, the final agenda.
The one for this one?
So I pulled the agenda when I pulled the agenda off the city site. It ends after the staff report of Mountain Metro ridership. Actually, doesn't have the book report, doesn't have the,
Oh, do we add that?
it was in the draft that you had sent me earlier,
Mhm.
and then it didn't make it into this one that's on the city's site.
Okay,
But
well, we'll double check that.
fully support talking about it. Yeah, that's the one I've got here.
Yeah, it's the same one. All right, so going to the next slide, biking and the bike and walkability drafting the ambassador biking plan is a huge project, and just looking at it from it's really from establishing a vision, creating a network, and putting a plan together to assess what facilities, amenities we have, and just collecting that data to put this in action. And then next slide. So one of the things that I asked, like in I think when I sent out the first email, is to look at all the possibilities, look at other cities and parts that we may want to emulate. That could have been a small city or a big city. And I know Corey did that, but I want to go around to see what cities interested you that you feel we may want to emulate.
Yeah, so I had actually used some AI technology today and was came up with a few lists of some cities, including small population and just a little bit of analysis. So we can get into those cities. I've got them here in front, but I'd like to hear any other comments from the board of what their thoughts were. Do you have ideas about other cities that have done good bike master plans that we're able to share?
Oh, I'll be happy to start. I looked up, went to the People for Bikes website to look at their ratings, and then looked at cities that were highly rated on their website as very biking cities. A couple of them, like the small size cities, Crested Butte was one of the top ones. Theirs is all about mountain biking, not really applicable to us. But I looked at a couple of big cities and a small town, and I really came away with my recommendations. I thought we had to look at Provincetown in Massachusetts, because it's a similar size city. It has the same constraints about widths of their streets and their inability, because it's historic also, to really just keep expanding, as opposed to, I looked at Seattle's bike plan, and they have a wonderful master bike plan and totally implementation and steps and reports of their progress every year, or maybe more often than yearly. And theirs was great, but realistically, how much of that can we actually do? A, they've got the money. B, they've got the space to change, but maybe there's some concepts from there. Those were my two favorite ones. I looked at Minneapolis was highly rated, but I could not actually find their master plan on their website. They listed it, but there was no link to click through. So I didn't actually get to look at the master plan. But those were kind of the two ends of the spectrum that I thought would be useful for us to look at. And to be honest, Provincetowns is pretty not well documented and structured, even though they know what they're doing. But it's, I just thought because it was comparable. So those were my two that I kind of looked at, and we'll need to do more. I just did cursory research, more specifics.
That's great. Thanks for sharing those. Rolf, do you have any comments about cities with good bike master plans?
I've done no research on that, but our big emphasis is to get visitors to ride into town or out of town on bikes. And we don't know what example that could be. Every other city's probably not dealing with such a influx of tourism from a giant metro area right next to us. So it's hard for us to get an example of what we need, but citizens riding bikes is great, and we need to encourage that when they leave town to use bikes and come back in. So it's hard for me to find an example. It's more like you have to look at just a smaller downtown region of commuting in and out of it, possibly, and trying to get an example is tough for us. We're such a unique thing. I'm sure there is something, but I just can't think of anything.
Carl, did you want to jump in?
Sure. So I'm going to jump on my soapbox for just a second. So I did my research on the League of American Bicyclists, their bike-friendly communities site, which actually was extremely useful. But before I jump into the cities, I want to really emphasize, I think we should leverage their bike-friendly community structure. They organize things by the 5 E's, so equity and accessibility, engineering, education, encouragement, evaluation, planning. And typically most master plans will follow that as well, but just they have a lot of tools and resources available that I think are really useful. And I'll also put a plug in that Manitou actually submitted a bike-friendly community plan, and we got honorable mention and got feedback. But that included at the time inventory of bike lanes and infrastructure and all that. And there again, something to build off of. And I'll note that the bike-friendly community deadline, it's yearly. The next submission for 2024 is June 25th, which is probably too soon because it's a bit of work. But just again, encourage out of this master plan that we consider submitting Manitou as a bike-friendly community. So we get recognition for our efforts. So that said, jumping to the cities. So if you're familiar with bike-friendly community, their ranking goes platinum, gold, silver, bronze, and honorable mention. And so I was able to search, and I searched for gold level because the platinum communities are all large. There was nothing that was kind of our population. So I went down a level to gold, and so I found Aspen, Colorado is a gold level bike-friendly community. Population at the time they claimed 7,359. Carbondale, Colorado is a gold. Their population is 6,820. I've actually ridden in Carbondale, and their infrastructure is very nice and very useful. Breckenridge, surprisingly, is a gold. Their population is 5,024. They're obviously much more ski mountain town oriented. And then Park City, Utah is also a gold bike-friendly community, and their population they claimed was 8,396. And so I think, to Susan's point, trying to model after communities of the same size, probably have the same sort of resources, might be more useful and provide more, input that we can relate to versus Seattle or Minneapolis and all that. But if you are interested in Minneapolis, we do have some connections with the Minnesota Bike Coalition. And so if you are interested in a master plan, we can maybe help connect you.
Okay, well, I'm just really impressed with the work that the board has done. I did some and it produced some results, but it was with ChatGPT, and so I'll just share what I did. So I was asking to tell me, give me 10 cities that have created bike master plans successfully in the last 8 years, and list who is the contractor. And I guess one of the things I want to understand with this discussion is, are we planning to hire a consultant to do a bike master plan? Has that decision been made?
Not yet, but we will make that decision as we get to the very end.
Okay, because I think that for me, we can look at cities we like and we can find out if they have good bike master plans, and there could be all kinds of reasons why they do or don't. Like Fort Collins is Fort Collins a platinum, or are they?
They're platinum, but they're much larger.
They're much larger, and they've got a history in the development of their bike infrastructure that is unique to Fort Collins. And so there's all kinds of things that might play into that. So I like it that we've identified some cities and some benchmarks. In my mind, the most important thing we can do is get a good contractor that is an expert in this. And so one of the things that bubbled up, I saw Tool Designs, Alta Planning, and Kimley Horn were repeated in a lot of these recent bike plans. And those are names that I know and am familiar with. And was it Tool that did the Colorado Springs Bike Master Plan? Do you remember?
I believe so.
Yeah. So we'd worked with them on that. So some of the cities that got mentioned came up in this list. Yeah. Like, Seattle, San Francisco, Minneapolis, maybe great places for biking, but maybe not so many things that we can take in Manitou. But it's interesting to know who did their plans. Boulder had a recent one from Alta. Prince George, BC, population 74,000. It's bigger than I thought. Then I said, can you give me 10 cities with populations under 10,000 that have got a new bike master plan in the last 8 years? And again, Alta and Tool and Kimley Horn came up. Brookings, Oregon recently did one. Breckenridge was on this list. Sedona, Sedona, you know, I think of Sedona or Telluride as cities that might have some of the similar challenges we have. We've got this great natural beauty. We'd love people to come in and you know, support our businesses, but we don't really want them to drive their cars around because we don't have space. And I think that's a challenge for Sedona and Telluride also. Jackson, Wyoming came on here. Eagle, Dillon, Colorado, that's probably too small. And Park City was on this list. Contractors Fair and Piers, I'm not familiar with them, but I guess my overall comment is when it's time, my opinion is we should invest in a experienced consultant that is familiar with this kind of work. I really think that's, you know, trying to invent it ourselves would not be a good investment, I guess, is my thought. And so I'd shared the list with Juan. So where are you at with it now, Juan, having heard the comments?
Well, yeah, no, the cities that I like to, I mean, there's a combination of two. One of them was Aspen, and I did like the city of Seattle, even though it's a big city, just because mostly like on the writing portion of it, of just writing everything as they have their plan, especially when it talks about their safety. They're very detailed on safety and their infrastructure for bike lanes as far as amenities. So the next thing, and Carl, you know, I've been working on this bike master plan, like when I first started, I've shared it with you. But because it's a massive project, and if we do go forward, you know, going with a consultant, I do need assistance and support, you know, with the next one, which is somebody's going to be just dedicated to standardize the terminology, you know, for the glossary. Yeah, it's going to be a critical part in putting this master plan together. And then the next one I need support with, like, where are we now as far as doing an inventory and also on the facilities and the amenities of Manitou Springs.
So just to maybe respond to that, I think, yeah, we could probably help with some standardizing some terminology. And I think the experts that do bike master plans have probably got that work done already.
That's if we could get one, Corey, but let's just say for some reason they don't give us one, and it comes down to our board putting this together.
Okay.
I'm not saying, I just want to be open to both.
Sure.
Because I do agree with you 100% that we should have an expert that is just dedicated to, because that's all they focus on, walkability and biking.
Okay. Any other comments about this? I mean, I'll just say I'm excited to support this. So make sure you let us know how we can help move it forward.
But what I want to know is who would want to take ownership of the standardizing the terminology and creating a glossary.
Any volunteers for that?
So are there existing master plans that we can plagiarize? I mean, do we really need to, I mean, we shouldn't reinvent the wheel there, right?
Coming, Carl?
I think that's the ask, is for us to do some research to go and look at some plans and then to come back and say, hey, here's a glossary with some standard terminology that
Right.
applies to a bike plan. And I think, yeah, I think they exist out there, and it's just a little bit of digging to create that list. Would you be interested in partnering up with me on that, Carl?
Sure.
Okay, so Carl and I will take a stab at that. I will say the next month is a little bit of a challenge for me, and I'm not sure I could promise to have it for the next meeting.
Well, it doesn't have to be for the next meeting. This is pretty much after, because that's one of the questions, when
Mhm.
you could have it. And it could be at the end of when we finish the chapter of the books. It doesn't have to be next month.
Okay,
We have a couple of more months.
well, to me, to have it ready, maybe not by the June meeting, but by the July meeting, I think is reasonable. Does that seem okay for you, Carl?
Sure, I'll support that to the best of my ability.
Okay,
What about inventory of facilities and amenities? You could do both.
I would be much more interested in the inventory.
Oh,
And so
really?
I would support that.
okay.
I mean, again, so I mean, I would brainstorm it. I would go look at our submission to the league for a bike-friendly city, which had an inventory and just update it.
Mhm.
And so that, to me, that's not a huge lift effort-wise.
Yeah, and I'm putting the master plan I'm putting together. I'm doing that myself. I just need the support for those two areas. And then once it comes down to either getting a consultant, we have everything in place.
Okay, so the process is you'd like to have standardized terms and our inventory, and then we'll make a decision about how we'd engage with a contractor.
Correct.
Well, let's, I'd like to help it. So Carl, maybe you and I will take both of those items. Okay,
All right, thank you.
all right.
So this is just a slide that I just wanted to share. It was just Sheriff of America's right who have ridden a bike in the last 12 months by age. The number one was the age bracket that rode the most was actually two of them, 30 to 39 and 40 to 49. The ones that biked the most. And these were statistics from across the country. And that's about it.
Okay,
That wraps up the presentation. Book study.
okay. Now, I'm trying to go back and find that original agenda because there's nothing else on our published agenda.
Corey, do you mind if I make
Go ahead, Carl.
one more comment? So I just wanted to comment on, you had a couple slides in your presentation about, percentage of people that ride and like People for Bike says that, lowest income households bike far more, for
Oh,
transportation.
could you go to that slide? I'm sorry. So what before that? Is it this one?
Yeah, there was kind of multiple slides kind of communicating the same
Yeah,
thing.
this one's tied into the other one. Can you go back up to the next one? So this is just statistically, a lot of people have the mindset that it's, the professional cyclists or the people who enjoy cycling are like they're the highest percentage, but actually the highest percentage are the people with the lowest incomes. Maybe because they don't have any transportation for work, so the only option they have is to bike. So the reason I had put that slide in there is something I mentioned earlier, that we just need to have the mindset of not what works for me, but what works for everyone in general. So that's why I put in these two slides, and they're both tied in together.
Right. And so I just wanted to comment as well, and this is unfortunately me getting my soapbox again. One of my frustrations is I've seen it talking to consultants and various folks in town, like the Creek Walk Trail. It seems like a lot of people view that as a recreational resource and not a transportation corridor. And it's kind of nuanced, but if it's a transportation corridor, it's important that there's cohesiveness and, that it's safe and that, hey, if I need to get to a meeting on time, I don't want to take some gigantic detour that if I was riding recreationally, I wouldn't care because I have all day. And so just it's kind of looking at it differently from a different set of priorities. And I just wanted to really emphasize that. And as well, even, people I've heard comment before, oh, hey, there's a bike lane on Manitou Avenue. People should just go use that. But, not recognizing the fact that you have large vehicles inches away from you, not giving you, space. And so the vast majority of people would not feel comfortable riding in that bike lane, even though that's been provided. And so people are like, well, how come no people aren't using it or whatever? And it's like, well, it's not really safe and convenient. Just like our walking discussion, it's the same thing from a cycling perspective. And so again, when we're trying to design those kind of resources, viewing it as transportation, not just recreation. And I think your data supports that, right? There's
Right.
a lot of the folks that are riding are dependent upon it.
Right.
And so, they want to get there safely. So
Yeah. No, good point, Carl.
So that brings up a question for me. Do we have to distinguish between transportation corridors versus recreation corridors? I mean, is there yeah, how are we going to meld those two philosophically, or are they, do you need to consider them separately? Are they mutually exclusive? I'm just questioning. I don't know.
I mean, that's a great question. And again, in Manitou, that probably comes down to a question of space, which we don't have in spades. And so, hey, how can the different uses get along? And there's obviously, I mean, I've heard pushback from people, that there's more e-bikes and people maybe not as experienced on the trails and maybe not riding courteously. And so oh, hey, why are these people on bikes on the trail riding? And so, there's definitely room for education and improvement there because there is mixed use. And maybe there's a way to move some of that onto, Bicycle Boulevard or some other alternative. But, the one point I wanted to make is, if I'm trying to ride from my house to, Jerry's garage or to, the keg or wherever, like having a trail that gets you 3/4 of the way there, it's still that last mile. And so, we need to think of it as transportation. I'm trying to get somewhere. I'm not just out riding that trail for recreation and allowing people to have complete journeys A to B.
I guess I'd respond to the question saying we ought to support both. I've heard the comment actually at Manitou Council saying, hey, we really want to support biking for transportation, but not necessarily like mountain biking or recreation. I don't think we've made that decision as a community. I think I like to ride my bike for recreation and for transportation. And in most cases, the infrastructure is the same or similar. I sometimes use the Inniman Trail for transportation on my bike. And there was a while when that was the only safe way you could ride your bike in and out of Manitou was on the Inniman Trail. So it's nuanced, and I think it ought to be, we ought to think of both those opportunities as ways that we can get more people biking and not in cars.
But I really applaud Susan for asking the question, right? Because we do need to think about, hey, if there's increased people riding bike ride from out of town, how do we educate them to ride courteously? How do, can we design the infrastructure such that it encourages them to do it better? All those kind of things I think are going to be important. So great question.
Cool. All right. Shall we keep moving on here?
We're done.
Done with the report.
This was the last slide.
And are you able to pull the agenda up? I think we've got, so there's old business, of which I think we don't have any. I'm not sure if, yeah, we'll take another look at the agenda because I don't know that reports is separate from. Yeah. Okay. So I don't think we have any old business. I think future agenda items, actually, we've decided to rename that, and that's board correspondence. So this is our opportunity for people on the board to bring up items of interest to the board to share. Carl, would you like to go ahead?
So I have a topic I'd like to throw out there, and I guess it's more of a future agenda item than a board correspondence, but I would like to propose, and maybe this is crazy, but I think it would be useful for the board to have some field trips, right? Maybe we should go ride the 36 shuttle, pretend we're visitors and try and get from the east side of Manitou Springs down here for a board meeting. And the same thing, come early and use the parking system. I don't regularly come downtown and park, but just pretend we're tourists and try and use the parking kiosks. And, I think as board members, the more we can do to experience the things that we're trying to discuss, it's really important. And I don't know how that fits into like a MAP board meeting, and maybe it's separate, but if we got to worry about sunshine laws, so put it on the agenda or whatever, but I just would like to encourage that as an idea for consideration by the board. And we could ride bike ride bikes once too, by the way.
Thanks, Carl. I think I could support that if that became a pet project that you wanted to organize. I'm not necessarily volunteering to take on organizing it, but if that was something that we could set up, I would participate.
Yeah, and I don't know, here again, from the sunshine law perspective and agenda, but logistics, maybe we can get feedback from staff, but like, is it hey, and if we start early at 4:30 or whatever, but somehow can we do it like 4:30? This month, we're going to ride the shuttle. Next month, we're going to ride Pike Ride. The next month, everybody's going to come. Well, and maybe if everybody else parks downtown and it's just me, but hey, let's go use the parking system and let James and the parking folks observe, right? Any challenges we have, and maybe we can give feedback live. And so I think we can be kind of guinea pigs and pretend we're tourists, right? Pretend we're tourists in Manitou to experience. And so I'm happy to suggest what we do per month, but the logistics, I would want to have input on staff and the timing and how we publicize it and all that.
I think we would have to publicize it if we were doing that, and it
Yes.
seems like a neat thing we could do, and members of the public might choose to join us.
Especially now with the trams, that'd be great.
The electric trolleys, that's another option, so we have like at least 4 things. And in summer is the perfect time to do it, one a month. And I didn't mean to cut you off, Susan.
I guess maybe I would say I like all of them except purposefully us all driving down and parking in the system. And I feel like I get enough experience doing that as it is. And so to make a special point of taking up a bunch of parking spots for our board meeting, I'm not as excited about that option, but the other options that I don't do as often are the ones that are interesting for me.
So just on the parking, so I believe, I'll show how now, there's not as much pressure on the parking in the evenings. And I don't, maybe it's we park at Hiawatha or we park on the east end, because yes, we want to be sensitive to the parking issue downtown. We don't want to take up prime parking space. I totally agree with that, but just something to come and park and be reasonably close, but yet not take up prime space.
And the point is for us to all do it together and talk about our experience of engaging with the parking system.
Yeah, and I think I think with all of them, I think having staff participate and, I'm sure all of us have not done all of those things. And so there'll always be somebody new, and being able to observe how they navigate and figure it out and how long do I have to wait for the bus or whatever, I think would be really good input or feedback for staff to have and not have to go out and talk to tourists, right?
No, it would be helpful. Just like the last time that you guys took the shuttle, gave us input like on the free shuttle decal, which is, or even just talking with people you're riding with, let me give you some feedback and then you can share that feedback with our team. That'd be very helpful.
So Juan, maybe you and I can help me with the logistics as far as the publicizing and the timing. I'm happy to drive what we do each month. If everybody's up for it, I don't want to force this on folks. I want to make sure it's a board consensus. Maybe we need to vote on it or something, but.
Sure. No, I will keep you in the loop once we, anything that we do, I can share it with you and then we can.
Yeah, because I'm more, I don't know how we would put it on like the agenda and publicize it. you know.
So I don't think we need to vote on it. I think we would need to publicize it, and it would be an opportunity that we provide. You know, we couldn't insist or force everybody to do it. But we could make the opportunity available and make the public aware that we're doing that. I think it's the right way to do it.
And do we want to do it at 5 and kind of maintain the timing, or do we want to try and do it at like 4:30 so we can maintain the normal agenda and schedule? And maybe that's the way to do it.
I would like to suggest you think about it. You've got general consensus of support here. So yeah, maybe think it through and put some ideas together. You can bounce them off me and Roy, and then we could bring them back to the group if we want to fine tune it.
Okay, I'll run with that.
Rolf, would you like to add some board correspondence?
But I have nothing for this month. That needs to be talked about, but I do like the idea of doing some field trips. I think it's a great idea. We advertise it and, you know, do experiment on all of those issues. So that's a great idea. Well done, Carl.
Hey, thank you, Rolf. Susan?
No, I have nothing else to add.
Okay, I've got one I wanted to bring up, and I apologize. I meant to have a little bit more material to share. I'm still interested in this idea that we ought to try some pilot programs related to safety improvements. And I reached out to an urban planner that works in Colorado Springs. His name is John Olson, and he's got some experience with pilot programs. And I know specifically he did a bunch on contract. He did a bunch down in Gunnison, and he's also I'm familiar with his work as as a planner. He would do these sort of like close the street, block party, parklet kind of. How do we activate our streets? So I asked him if he could give us, you know, sort of a scoping document that would let us know what it might cost to try a pilot. And the pilot I proposed was to put a separated bike lane on Crystal Hills Boulevard, the one that goes under the underpass. And I think it's broadly acknowledged that that's the design of that street causes people to drive very fast, and it doesn't feel safe when you're biking or walking. And so I did want to check it through and see if it's all right with you. I'd like to go ahead and get some, you know, actually develop a proposal for what it would look like to do a pilot of some bike infrastructure, maybe just on the uphill lane on that street. Is that worth doing? Do you have other things in mind for that street that we should know about? That
No, but is that Crystal Hills Boulevard or Crystal Park?
I'm talking Crystal Hills Boulevard.
Okay,
in
okay.
space.
Yeah, I know, because I think I was out there with you, right? On the underpass. So yeah,
Yeah, I've ridden up it a couple times and I'm like, oh, I don't think people would, I'm sure people don't enjoy riding up there. And, you know, it ties into there's been a discussion about a future trail connection from Bill Bauer Park that might parallel Crystal Hills Boulevard. And so, you know, what are our options for safe, non-motorized or, you know, not in a vehicle travel up and down that road? So my proposal, if there's no objections, is I will continue to work with John and I'll get some more information and I'll share that at a future board meeting, and we can talk about what it might look like to move forward with a pilot there.
yeah, no, and I don't think it'll be a problem because we have been looking at that area, and I think I shared it with Carl, you know, for putting up a pedestrian crosswalk and a possible bike lane. So we'd definitely be open to that for sure.
Okay, so it's something that staff's interested in anyway, and
Right.
I like the idea that we can get used to trying these pilots and we start figuring out what is the data that we want to collect, and
Mhm.
you know, how do we design a pilot that allows us to make an intelligent decision moving forward. So I'll keep working on that and I'll share some information when I get it. Any other comments? Last call. Is there any other members of the public that joined us? James, can you see anyone else online? Okay. I declare this meeting adjourned at 6:48. Thank you, everyone.
See you all.
Thank you.